Hi weaving friends, we were having a bit of a discussion the other day over in the private members group that I have for the online weaving school, and we were talking about back issues and warping, and this is something that is really close to my heart because I figured out very quickly that to be able to warp successfully and to be able to continue in this journey of weaving, when you have a bad back or a back injury or other challenges to do with your back, you need to really think about the best ways to use your loom so that you can have a good and happy warping and weaving relationship going forward. So I've got 3 tips that I want to share today, things that have really helped me in my warping journey with back pain. And these are very simple tips, but it just takes that little bit extra thought before you go ahead and start doing something without thinking about it. You've got to think about the repercussions and how we can mitigate those. Okay, so the first thing is the height of the loom. You'll notice that my loom is set quite high against my body. It's not so high that I'm going to be reaching up in order to take those loops through the heddle, and it's not so low that I'm going to be bending over. For me, and I know for a lot of people with back trouble, this right here is like one of the worst movements. And although it seems not problematic when I just do it like this, if I'm doing that repetitively and I'm doing that for a certain amount of time, that is going to cause a back spasm for me, and I'll probably be in bed for 3 days. So I know this about myself, and I know that I need to do things in a way that I'm not going to be making that movement. So this is a great height for me. I know it can be a little bit challenging to get your loom to a certain height, and it does depend on whether you are warping from your stand or you're warping from a table or whatever it is. Generally, a dining room table is a pretty good height, but this table that I've got in my studio is even better because it's that little bit taller. There are things that you can do to raise your loom up a little bit. If you have it on a stand, you can put some sort of razors underneath, not razors like shaving razors. I mean things to raise the stand actually up. You can stick them underneath the legs and make them go up that way. That is what one of the weavers in the weaving group did, and she put a photo in to show us all how that looks, and I thought that was a really great solution. And another thing is, if you have it on a table and the table's just not quite big enough, then there are going to be things that you can put underneath the loom to just raise it up that little bit. That can make a world of difference. Now, another problem for me when I'm warping my loom often occurs after I get to the halfway mark. So I start threading on the left here, and I'm standing, right beside the loom or right behind the loom. And that all goes pretty well, but it's when I get to that halfway mark and then I need to start leaning across. You see, I'm getting that movement again that causes me so much trouble. And so I've thought carefully about the ways that I can do things differently so that I'm not making that movement. So tip 2 is, once you get halfway across threading the heddle, pop around the back of the loom. So the big difference with being at the back of the loom is the reachability of the heddle for me. So rather than having to make that movement of bending over and stretching my arm out, I can instead come to the very back of the loom. I can grab whatever thread it is that I'm threading next, and I can stand right here. There's no bending at all. I'm standing up quite straight. I can pop my threading hook through, grab my loop, and then I can come to the side of the loom, but I'm still not bending, and then just walk straight to the warping peg. So another issue that can occur, may or may not be a problem for you, but I think it's definitely worth mentioning, is if you're using multiple pegs, which I do recommend that you do for a wider warp if you can, it does sometimes mean that your peg might be a little further away from you. For example, when I get to threading the very last quarter of the heddle, I'll be using this peg here. It's not much of a stretch. It might be more depending on the project. So it's not too much of an issue for me at the moment, But if it is for you, especially if you've got shorter arms and you don't want to be doing that leaning over, this is where tip 3 comes into play. So you can see the problem here is my loom is clamped to one side of the table and I've been working from that side the whole time. But now I'm working on the second half of the heddle, as I explained before, and so I'm kind of doing things from the other side. So another solution to that problem could be to actually move your whole loom and warp to the opposite side of the table so that you can work from that side. Now this is not going to suit everybody, but it may just be the answer for some of you to prevent back problems from occurring. To move the loom, it would be quite simple. I've got my warping board clamped here at the moment. I'll just take the clamps off. And then, bit by bit, I won't move it all at once because I don't want to stretch my warp or do anything weird at the other end. And then come down to this end and gently move the loom across to match where I move the warping board to. Then I'll come back to the warping board. I'll push it over again. Go back to the loom. This loom is not clamped to the table, by the way. This is the low yarn flex and I don't need to clamp it. It has little legs that I'm using to keep the loom in place against the edge of the table. So it's easy to just slide it across like that. I can slide it as far as I want. And then same with my warping board over to match up or line up approximately with where I had it before. Now I just need to pop my clamps back on. And then I can start working again from this side of the loom. So I continue on to warp the second half of the heddle, but this time I'm standing close to it just like I was on the opposite side. And it's that simple. Well, I hope that this was super helpful to you, and until next time, happy weaving.